Thank you everybody for joining up right now, and for those who are on their way. My name is Fan. I'm the chair of the BCS Bedford, and welcome for people who join us tonight. And we know some of the committees, and we know the people that we're not so familiar with, so it'd be good to introduce. By way of introduction is that in better times, we tend to meet at the Bedford Hotel every month-ish, thereabout. Um, our last face-to-face meeting was sometime in March 2020, when we have a really good speaker from ALM who come and joined us. And we were able to know about that before then. We started to think there may be a lockdown and didn't plan so much things. And then as it happened, it does happen. And then our thinking is maybe the lockdown is not going to last that much. Maybe we can get something together in September, but of course it didn't happen like that. And to some extent, we also have colleagues on the committee affected by COVID. And so we didn't pull together a program as soon as we want to, but it does happen. And what I'd like to introduce is that I'll just pull the screen for one moment. Is that over the hardworking last few weeks, the committee have started to put together a program. And what we have decided is that we'll accept the uncertainty and the unknown. And so on the basis that we are probably going to be having online meeting for the rest of the year. And in order to create a rhythm that people can know that this is when this bunch of people meet together, we've decided on the second Monday of each month, and we've created a booking with BCS HQ. And since January is just now, we're wanting to start to use the rhythm for the ongoing month, and all those days are booked in the BSS system. And we have set up the set of topic that we have on the screen now, and different colleagues are responsible to pull together a speaker, and we aim to get the information together and then beginning to populate the whole BCS event website for the rest of the year. And so it should be available for people to pursue. And we look forward to see everybody every Monday of the month. And I think that would be a really good thing for us to be able to join together. Thank you, Ian, who helped us to update the website. I think we were penning down the word that we hope these kind of meeting is not a one-way communication, and we want to start from tonight. And so we hope it is a place that you can find comfortable to come share your experience, your thought. It's making it more like a community rather than a meeting or a lecture that you listen and go away. So we really, really want to hear from everybody. We're happy that Dr. John Lockley is going to steer us through tonight, and there are quite a few things that we can learn from him. In way of introduction, what I'd like to do is to actually pop the other slide to show the committee member. Oops, need to update this as well. For the people who are on the call and who are not familiar with the committee, you know who we are. And then in the future, you can actually get to find us more. So I am the first person on the list, which is Fan. And somewhere on the delegate list, you'll find Severio. He's our secretary, and he's going to take some notes for today. On the screen where you have two persons, that's actually David and Chris. So David is our treasurer, who also sits on the committee. And we also have, now I need to play with the technology, which is not always easy. We also have, we haven't seen Ian joining us first. He probably will be coming on board later. So here's our webmaster. Haven't seen Sue yet. So she worked in University of Bedfordshire and helped us to effectively run our Luton-based activity. And apart from being treasurer, David also have the multiple heads of our membership secretary and the inclusion officer as well. Phil, he's a policeman. He's on duty tonight, so we don't see him, and he helped us to run our social media. John, who is going to chair us later, will be with us soon, kicking off in a minute. And then we have Andrew, who is not showing his happy face yet. George, you can see his complex atoms or maybe some other kind of more complex string-like items. He's also with the committee. So that's who we are. I think we have a few participants who are not committee member, and we really thank you for coming, because we put this together at very short notice, and our comms do not go out much earlier than probably last Friday. So it's great for you to be with us. But would you be kind enough to either show your screen or maybe say a few words about yourself before the proceeding starts? And we know Ranka had been with us from the very beginning.
I'm Ranga. I'm joining from Chester. I work in the oil and gas industry as an engineer.
Wow, welcome. That's a long way. And thank you for coming all this distance. We also have Lawrence with us.
Hello there. I'm in Lidlington, sort of halfway between Bedford and Milton Keynes. I generally work in electronics hardware around Internet of Things, but I do drift a little way into low-level firmware, but generally nothing that involves any kind of operating system.
Okay.
Andrew Cordani. I'm in Tooting, sunny Tooting, southwest London. A friend of Lawrence, and that's how I got involved with, or got to come along to you guys. I'm a software engineer, mostly IoT, image processing, and audio and music. Yeah, anything that I find interesting, really. So yeah, I assist Lawrence occasionally on IoT type projects. However I can.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Andrew. We also have Unjusi. I hope I didn't get your pronunciation too far off.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jose. I'm joining from Glasgow. Your pronunciation was okay. It's pronounced with a silent N. So it's Jose. I'm a software engineer involved in oil and gas simulation. And I find this interesting. So I'm joining to see what others are doing. And one of the challenges I've set myself because of COVID-19 is to set up a website and have all local businesses to give them the opportunity to have an online presence. So that's a challenge that I've set myself.
Wow, that is very good. And thank you all the way from the other country. Hopefully we don't need to use a passport to come to see you.
Yeah, thanks.
And we also have Simon. Okay, maybe Simon is a bit mic shy at the moment.
Okay, not to worry.
So I think I'll hand it over to you, John.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Apologies for my my throat. I hope it doesn't disturb you too much. I'll probably have to cough a few times. Nothing to do with COVID. I just swallowed something and inhaled it last night, and I've not quite recovered from it yet. So anyway, I'm a medical doctor. For those of you who don't know me, I recently retired from being a GP. I'm still active in medical informatics, and I have been in medical informatics since about the mid-80s. The idea for this, for tonight, was actually, I think, sort of stimulated by me, because I'm very interested in how people work with the computers. And the sort of thing that I wanted to do, particularly as we hadn't got time to organize anybody to come and speak for 3 or 4 days time. I apologize for the rather short notice on this. I hope we haven't caused too much trouble to people. But what I'd like to do, bearing in mind what a tumultuous year we've all had, I'd love it if we could share what we found was the difficulties and the benefits and the trigger points and the points to think about for the future. We're going to take a record of this. We're going to, I think, maybe put it on our website and certainly spread the ideas of what we talk about. So it isn't a question just of us talking among ourselves. It's very much a matter of us thinking about things and maybe stimulating other people or stimulating the BCS itself to take action on our behalf to assist not just us, but also other members. Let me start a little bit, if I may, on the medical side, simply because it's an area that I know a little bit about, but less and less from the practical point of view, because I've not been in practice as a GP for 3 years. What has happened with COVID? Obviously, we had a huge job technically of trying to work out what it was, what it did, and how to make people better if we could, and how to protect against it. And I'm not actually interested so much in that aspect of things today. I'm thinking more what practices discovered, because everybody had to work in a different way. We had to work with distancing. We had to make sure that the people who were in our practices acting as healthcare workers weren't exposed unnecessarily. That in itself was a logistical nightmare and has led to the idea that people have that practices aren't really open, whereas actually what has happened with all practices is that they've said, we don't want you to walk in, we want you to ring in, make an appointment, and then we'll ring you back and decide exactly what to do about the situation. If you need to be seen, we'll show you exactly where you need to go, and we'll book you in. So in other words, it's work as normal, except that it's a bit more spread out. But it's taken a certain amount of time to get in the hang of it. And also the PR hasn't been the very best, I'm afraid, because there are an awful lot of people who think that many of the GPs aren't working particularly hard. Now, the other thing that has particularly affected us all is that obviously for most people, we've had to work from home. We've had to have meetings on Zoom. I personally have enjoyed the fact that we've had meetings on Zoom, because if you are a very busy professional, the last thing you want to do is to spend half an hour or an hour in your car getting to a meeting and then half an hour or 3/4 of an hour getting back again. So I think that has been very, very effective in making it easy for us to have meetings, even impromptu ones, which I think is great. You can call meetings very quickly without even having to worry about whether you can get transport or whether you can get cover if you're somebody who's on call. So what I'd be interested in doing is just using that as a trigger and saying to people, what did they find about things like working from home and Zoom meetings and such like? Fire away.
I'll pop in if I may then. I've been working from home for 20 years. So actually it was more that other people were available to meet with me on Zoom. It became more the done thing to have meetings that way. And initially, I very much welcomed it. I managed to pack in far more meetings, but after 2 or 3 weeks, I noticed that by mid-afternoon, I was exhausted, because instead of having 10 minutes, I quite often used to go down for a series of meetings in London. And yes, I agree with you. I only ever got the 10 o'clock train in, so I always avoided rush hour to go in. But when I did get down there, I used to generally have meetings as back to back as I could through till, and usually ran it into an evening meetup type event as well. What I found with Zoom meetings, I was doing the classic thing of really got to go because I'm late for, I had another meeting that was supposed to start 10 minutes ago and so on. And that having no downtime at all between them led to just really surprisingly tired out by 2 o'clock.
Agree. I find that I really miss physically meeting up with people and the chit chat that goes along with, before and after meetings. But I find that staring at a screen in one place and looking at all the faces, sort of, looking almost being face to face with lots of people, whereas you're normally looking at the backs of people's heads and one person, tiring. And I'd like to think that it's meant that I've attended more events. However, I like Lawrence, I think I've been a lot more tired at the end of them. I find them really hard work. And I've realised how much I miss, how much I used to really enjoy the going out and seeing people. Like Lawrence, I'm at home most of the time, normally, sort of thing. So I really miss not going out. So, yeah.
Andrew, do you want to talk about the things that you were talking about in the meeting last week, about the software that allows you to meet as though you're in a pub? Because one of the things that I've been highly aware of is that the one thing you can't do on a Zoom meeting is to have is basically to network semi-privately. And I mean, you can do things by having breakout rooms in IT, in cyberspace. That is possible to do it. But Andrew was talking last week about some software that does allow people to do the networking in a much more fluid sort of way. Do you want to talk about it,
I can do it. It's actually something that Lawrence, I don't think I'm giving any secrets away, but Lawrence likes pubs. Says he look at his background. He enjoys pubs, and like me, I think we both kind of, or all of us actually, that are friends of Factory, quite enjoy the chit chat and what have you been working on, and almost the hearing snippets of conversation of the people to your right and left and in front of you, as well as just normal chit chat. So it's a kind of pub environment, and Zoom doesn't seem to allow that. It's very much one person speaking. It's a broadcast where lots are listening. Others can speak, but they have to put their hands up, and it's all kind of regimented, as opposed to the more public pub type, sitting there chatting with friends and hearing somebody mention something you're interested to one side and going, oh, hang on, actually, I've just seen this, that, the other. So it's a lot more human, for want of a better description, and less regimented. One of the websites, we've tried a couple of websites that seem to be available, which are somewhat Zoomish. One is called wonder.me or wander.me, I'm not really sure how you pronounce it, and the other one is High Fidelity, both of which seem to be very, and they're both open. There was the closest thing I can think of to a pub, in that they're not private, they're not particularly secret. Yes, you have to give somebody a link, but theoretically anybody could find that link. So anybody could find the pub that you're having a private chat with your friend at the bottom of the road, and so anybody could wander in on your conversation, theoretically. So it's not so for privacy. However, it's a kind of place you can chit chat. They seem to be set up, the two that I've tried so far, seem to be set up to make that easier. One of them in particular uses a kind of stereo effect. So you get like a sort of plan view of a room. You can basically, you can hear the people that are closest to you physically on the plan the most, and people that wander away, it's a bit like is it an anechoic chamber? There's an effect they use on radio, which is basically a spiral of panels that deaden the sound, and it sounds, you walk into one of these things, and as you walk into it, your voice disappears. Well, they've done the same sort of thing in software, so that you can sit next to somebody and chat like they're next to you, like they are, and you hear somebody on your right, in your right headphone speaker, and somebody on your left. But if they move away from you, it goes quiet quite quickly. So you can pair off, and rather than this concept of Zoom where you have a separate room, you can actually just wander towards the pool area, and nobody else in the room that is nearby, and you can see who's nearby, can hear you. Obviously, all that is going through some server somewhere on the planet, so it's not particularly private, really. It's going through some third-party server, and you've got no control over that, I assume. However, for people chatting, it's quite a natural kind of, you can take a conversation about football away from people who aren't interested in football, and that'd be me, by the way.
That sounds a very interesting thing. I wonder, Andrew, if you could just use the chat function to pop up a couple of notes in a few moments, just to say the names of the things, so that other people can have a look at it and, if necessary, jot down what we have discussed. Anybody else got any thoughts about the business of networking?
One thing that I've realized, before lockdown and working from home, was very much office based. I didn't go out at all. And I miss the interaction of the kitchen, wandering in, getting a cuppa and listening into conversations that might be there, or instigating conversations just with my immediate colleagues. Sometimes that's how I found out what problems people were having, or what new things are coming down the line. And I'm missing it.
I think it's got a nickname, hasn't it? The water cooler moment.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree entirely. And Lawrence, I think it was you who was saying about feeling very tired. I agree 100% over that. And as I said, I'm very interested in the human side of the human-computer interaction. The obvious way to get around it is just to plan meetings with spaces between, and not to feel guilty about having the spaces between, and giving yourself time to get out the chair and wander around and maybe ring somebody up or whatever. Rather than thinking, oh gosh, we're tight for time, let's make all these meetings back to back, then we can get more in, because you will get tired, and we're not built to work like machines. But that's the doctor in me speaking, so I'll shut up again now. Anybody else got any thoughts about that, and thoughts about networking or alternative ways of doing it? George, do.
Go on, please.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, before it is forced on us. Actually, I use it to commute on weekly, Monday to Friday, to Glasgow.
Right.
And it was never thought that working from home is possible. But suddenly when it was imposed on us, we adapted within 24 hours and started using the Zoom, and then working more and more. But however, now I'm finding it, actually the human interaction is gone. As David said, the water cooler moment is the one major I'm missing. But still things are working out by doing the remote meetings.
George.
Yeah, thank you. Well, hello everyone. Whatever Lawrence, David, Ranga, and Andrew have mentioned is really true reality. I mean, I have worked remotely for quite some time. I mean, I have always used Zoom, even before Zoom was introduced into the market. I used the beta release of Zoom, and even in the alpha testing. So I believe I'm well adapted to working online. This is not the problem. The problem is we long for the freedom of doing things. So you want to go to the supermarket, you want to go to the park, you want to go to meet someone face to face. And of course, the water cooler moment is very, very important in day-to-day interactions. So we are not programmed as machines. We do program machines, but we are not programmed as machines. And rightly said, previously, I used to work remotely, probably 2-3 days per week even. And I'm well acquainted with the back-to-back arrangement that you can set up meetings and you have to introduce a 10 minutes break. But now things are not going in that way. We tend to overbook ourselves even. And this is not good for the health, not good for the sanity, and not good for the well-being. And I believe.
Why does that happen, George? Why do people overbook, given that they've got more time because they don't have to do as much traveling?
I think people want to prove that they are useful. Probably as a reaction to the furlough scheme, probably people wanted to say that don't furlough us. We wanna do whatever is possible. We wanna be like over enthusiastic about things. Could be the case. I don't know, but I can see that many of my colleagues and sometimes myself, we tend to overbook, and this is not good at all. And I believe there is a and now allow me to give a little bit of my view, because I worked in the past also in genomics, and I believe working in front of a computer screen would help increase the levels of dopamine in the brain, especially the blue light, and this would actually repress the serotonin in the brain, and this will lead to potential addiction. I'm not so sure, but it could be. But what I'm sure of is that the increased dopamine would lead to more depressive states in the person, and we need to be very, very cautious about this as users. Also, the exposure to radio frequencies. I mean, now in front of me, I have 3 machines working. I have 1 server and 2 laptops, and this is not good for the health, so to speak. Although I'm actually I have always worked in computing, and my training and my specialty is in software engineering and computing and artificial intelligence, and I believe that computers are very helpful, but we need to control computers, not computers control us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so
fully agree. Very interesting that. I'd not thought about that as being an important point. What is interesting, I mean, looking back at my life, is that I've been stuck, as a GP, I've been stuck in front of a computer screen for a very large percentage of each day, because that's where we put the notes and that's where we enter the notes. And we are very near to the computers at all time. And we have been for about 15 years, I think. I'm not sure that other people have mentioned this as a specific problem in the way that you have, George. One of the things that I'm very interested in is how many of us have said that we start to find it a little bit difficult, that we don't meet other people quite as much, because we, above all others, tend to have the reputation as a whole load of IT nerds of not really wanting society and not really wanting anybody else. And you'd be far happier in front of a computer screen. And then when you actually put us in front of a computer screen, actually it doesn't quite work that way. So I find it interesting that it seems to break the mold, and it seems to break the idea that other people may have about us, which is quite an interesting little thing, I think. That's lovely. Anybody else got any thoughts about that general area? Right. One of the things that incidentally, I don't want to be the person in many ways who is leading the discussion. I want to be enabling the discussion. So if there are aspects of things that you want to talk about, please, please, please just either stick up your hand or butt in, because the whole point is that we want to share our ideas rather than that. I don't want to get you talking to a particular formula that I've worked out. I have no personal experience whatsoever of being in business. I've only done medicine and I've only done medical informatics and writing as well. So I've got no experience of working in the commercial world. I've got no experience of working in sales or marketing or anything like that. Are there anything, I don't know whether any of us here have got experience of that. I don't know whether anybody's got experience of the changes that have happened since we've had lockdowns and things like this. But are there any things that you think that we could learn or need to learn from that sort of area generally?
Something I've just tagged it on the end of the links. I've given some links in the chat on the right hand side if people haven't found it yet. Something that concerns me a little bit is I suspect that there's whole swathes of people who would find this really useful and helpful, who for one reason or another, don't have Wi-Fi at home, traditionally aren't computer users, have got a mobile phone that doesn't, maybe it's they don't know it well enough to take part. So I think we're missing huge swathes of people who would find this really useful and handy, and who can't fundamentally. I suspect that there's an awful lots of people who in the past, there's lots of people not visiting grandparents, but have bought them a laptop sort of thing and taught them how to turn it on and go straight to Zoom, or the latest update for Windows seems to include a kind of Skype feature. I haven't tried it yet, but it seems a lot more useful. I think that lots of people, it's taken a while, a surprising while actually, from my point of view, to get to where we are about having people chatting online. And I think there's going to be lots and lots of things coming out in the forthcoming year if this persists. And even if it doesn't persist, I think lots and lots of people have realised that there's things that they hadn't realised they could do that they can do.
What are the gaps particularly that you're thinking about?
I'm thinking mostly. I'm thinking of if I were to walk down the high street and ask, sort of 9 out of 10, how many people have used Zoom or Skype or any of the other things, I think an awful lot of them won't know it. I think
really. Just about everybody I know is on Zoom all the time.
Okay.
Thinking like teachers, and particularly they're using that an awful lot.
Oh, definitely the younger ones will definitely be using it, obviously. I'm thinking of, there's a tranche older than me, I suspect, and those who weren't traditionally IT users. So I can think of a few people who they use their laptop for maybe doing a bit of online shopping, perhaps, but almost nothing else, and maybe a bit of Wikipedia looking up. But there's an awful lot of people who still, there's places in the UK at the very least that don't have a reliable, fast internet link, which is needed by these kinds of devices. So I think that I think we've lost, or we haven't quite got the outreach that we should have yet.
Is there anything that you think in terms of software people ought to be thinking about or building? or anything in terms of hardware for that matter. But
yes, but I think Lawrence would kill me. We've had some discussions.
Can we watch?
We've had some discussions about some stuff that is obviously missing from the things we're using at the moment.
Okay, Lawrence, your turn. Confess.
Sorry, mate, I dropped you in it.
No, I don't feel particularly secretive about anything we've got. I think maybe we might have identified what feels like some shortcomings in the way things currently work on Zoom. And I think John, I think you identified some of those same things. And being a hardware person, I always try and invent a product, a tangible thing that's going to solve society's problems. But I don't think anything that we've spoken about, Andrew, is needs to be considered confidential. But I also think they were sort of slight niceties that are not essential to the ways of addressing the shortcomings. So, I mean, just by way of explanation, Factory is a group of consultants that we pull together on a project-by-project basis, and it's mostly people who have turned away from big office type working. So, almost all of the associates are one-man bands. Generally have been working from home for many years, and probably being stereotypical electronic engineers, IT people. Yes, we're a bit like the IT crowd. We're not we're probably not what you might think of as the most social of people. And I think probably because we're also very enthusiastic about what we do, we didn't necessarily have a lot of activities outside of that interest group. So, of an evening, I would go along to evening electronics meetups, and so on. I recognised there was sort of a need for us to, and this is even before lockdown. We were doing this. We had sort of virtual pub sessions, just to create those water cooler moments. And I think a lot of us work not necessarily for the pay packet, but for the peer recognition of a job well done. I often have said to my wife that I'll work for 3 months on a project, and even if the client appreciates it, and even if the client gets round to saying thank you, a little voice in my head is saying, yeah, but what do you know? Whereas if I walk into a pub and I get out of my pocket the little thing that I've been working on for 3 months, and Andrew says, "Oh, that's cool," that 3/4 of a second counts for more than 3 months of monetary reward, because someone whose opinion I respect has gone, "Oh, that's cool," and that's the thing that we started having our little virtual pub sessions for. Another thing we've started doing is having Friday 5:15s, which is to mark the end of a week. I have worked for myself effectively for a long time, and Saturdays and Sundays don't really, they're no different to the other days, apart from there's usually a different brand of rubbish television on in the evenings. So I tend to just work whichever day suits me and go shopping on whichever day suits me. And I've started trying to have this discipline of the Friday 5:15, have a few beers communally, just to mark the end of a week, to remind ourselves that it's the end of a week and a chance to talk about these things.
I like that. I like that. And I find it fascinating that you, as a hardware person, are talking about something which is actually entirely human factors.
Yes, yeah. And I think I mean, I absolutely applaud what BCS is doing here, because when lockdown happened, suddenly there were hundreds of webinars available. Every marketing department were creating half-hour or 1 hour mini workshops that you could tune into, and I did loads of that. But that in some ways that just made it even harder to have the water cooler moments, because we were all doing those things individually and didn't have anyone to talk to. So we had that. What we did discover was that Zooms or any of the video conferencing platforms worked reasonably well until you had sort of 5-6 people. Then it tended to turn into a one-person talks while the remainder listen, just because of the tendency not to be able to just interject with or really, or those little interjections. And what we did find was the audio only version that Andrew was talking about, high fidelity. It was really transformative in the way that we interacted. That it did give. It was a far more natural experience because of the way it did the audio, and because it was spatially. I could hear one person in one direction and another person in the other, which allowed the brain to separate them out.
That's very much like what Andrew was talking about, isn't it?
Well,
know,
it
the
was
person next to you in the pub.
It was with Lawrence. We were messing around. In fact, I had a try with Fan as well. But it doesn't really work one-to-one. It's better for. It's a bit like this. I've taken over this Zoom by simply speaking, and everybody else is shutting up. Wouldn't happen in a pub generally, unless somebody said something really astonishing and everybody turned to face them. This is exactly the sort of thing that we were looking for when we found these the two sites that I've put in the chat. So I'll shut up now.
Oh, that's very useful. Lawrence, is there anything else that you felt from your the things that you've been thinking through about the different ways of working, or where there are whole? Again, I'm trying to focus this also on ways forward. What else could we be doing? What else could we be suggesting that others create in terms of hardware or software, or schema for how you interact with people, or how you do your job better when you're working from home?
I don't know about the putting aside the working from home part, the networking meetings type thing. And I mean, most of my work comes from networking type events. It's always been word of mouth. But I used to go to a lot of in-person meetups. And I also ran the IoT Milton Keynes meetup group. The biggest and the thing with WonderMe, and there are a couple of other platforms that allow it, that Zoom is fine, but it's primarily one person talking, and if someone is not particularly interested in the subject matter that's going on, they kind of have to sort of sit back and wait for the subject to evolve into something that does interest them. WonderMe, and there's another platform, Remo, that I've experienced. It's a bit like it allows you to do breakout rooms like Zoom does, but you don't need the person, you don't need the host to assign you into the rooms. With WonderMe, if this conversation doesn't interest you, you can simply withdraw yourself and go off somewhere else. So I I created a room with areas marked about what sort of subjects you might want to talk about, and you simply wander off and form your own groups with that. So yes, if there's if I started talking about the Leeds match yesterday and how it was completely astonishing, and Andrew has no interest whatsoever in football, he would quite likely withdraw and go and talk about something that that interests him. And because you're not making a big thing of leaving the room, it's not like it's not impolite to suddenly disappear off and go and talk elsewhere. And it's even less of an issue with high fidelity because you just move away a little bit and the football conversation gets quieter and you can hear clearly the conversation that you do want to have. So they were the other thing that just purely on an interpersonal factors thing was, yes, I like pubs. I particularly like real ale pubs, but the not going to the pub revealed to me something that I hadn't realised, was that the completely irrelevant conversations that you overhear, the things which don't interest, I didn't think interested me at all, but which you overhear in public spaces, just gives you a certain amount of recalibration. You realise that other people have other concerns that you're completely unaware of. And it was during the summer, my wife and I did go away for one night away, and we went into a pub. And I don't think either of us spoke to each other for about 3 hours. We just sat there and overheard conversations around us. It was beautiful to be back in and having that kind of. I don't know whether other people maybe get this need satisfied by watching soap operas. They get just other people's lives filtering in. So that's just another psychological thing.
Again, as I said, I find it fascinating that we're supposed to be an IT group, and here we are talking about human factors and human factors and human factors and human factors, and I find it utterly fascinating that this is what's going on. George, I think there was something you were trying to say at one point, and I think
yeah, thank you. I couldn't agree more with Lawrence. The human factor is very important in here. When we meet people face to face, we tend to develop empathy, and then these are ramifications in the brain where we pick up the waves from the other person. Using a Zoom, I cannot pick that up. The maximum I can do is try to have an eye contact, and that eye contact may not be that successful because we are eye contacting several screens at the same time, and this may not really work. So my view, yeah, exactly, body language, exactly, Andrew, and this is very important. I mean, in a conversation, if I'm in a face-to-face conversation, the first thing I have, and this is a known rule in marketing, I have 30 seconds to basically make a certain connection with the person I am talking to. In Zoom, this may not be always the case, and Zoom and other. I mean, I'm not particularly talking about Zoom, but in video conferencing, the idea of video conferencing was basically initially it was to support I would say remote users by just fixing their systems, and then it developed. Zoom is a very excellent tool, and other and other tools are very good. For example, for conducting a webinar, for conducting things, but to transform all our life into, or at least our working life into this machine-based environment, I think it needs some change. Something must be done. And as we speak, I'm working on in the background. I'm working on a project that does address certain areas in video conferencing and video communication. And I hope at one point in time in the future I can share a demo with everyone on this call, hopefully. But this is an amazing fact that we need to have the human factor before talking about the machine factor.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Is there anything that you can talk about at the moment over what you've been thinking through in terms of what problems you're trying to get over? What are the problems that you perceive that we didn't know about before, or the significance of which we didn't know before? And do you have any solutions that you can talk about at this stage?
I can't. Well, there are certain things I'm working on a patent basis, and I will not mention at the moment.
Sure, that's all right. I don't want to break confidence or anything like that. It's more a question of, you know, you said some very, very interesting things as beginnings of discussions. What I'm wondering is there anything that is more concrete that we can actually take away from this, or do we have to sort of watch this space until you're able to give a demonstration?
Well, I can say that a piece of advice: keep controlling your machine. Don't let the machine control you. And from a medical perspective, and I believe you will agree with me, blue light is very bad for the eyes and for the brain. And most machines that are not equipped with a blue light built-in filter would cause you problems, would cause the person lots of problems. And many people do not really realize that fact. This is from the technicity of the screens, because LED screens and LCD screens would emit blue light, and you need to have a blue light filter on that. Other things from a usability perspective, we need to be more interactive and try to establish, like Lawrence was saying, we need to think about the ambiance of the atmosphere of the conversation, not to take it as if we are playing cards here in Zoom. It's like playing cards. You have everything in a mechanical way done. But if you go to a pub, and I love pubs as well, so if you go to a pub, it's totally different. It's impromptu. Here we are less impromptu, and this will cause us to be always in an icy situation, so to speak. So we need to break that ice, if I may say.
How would you do that?
Scrap Zoom.
What do you replace Zoom with, though?
Well, with the solution I'm working on.
Oh, I see. All right. Yes, got it. All right. I'll go away. Yes, I understand now. Yeah. Good. Okay.
But still, this is early time to say, because it requires a lot of research and testing. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that sounds interesting. Certainly very interesting as a starter for what what your work is, what you're working on. And that's really interesting. So do please come back to us and tell us about things once you've got to the stage where you can do that. I'm aware that there are a whole load of people here who haven't actually said anything. I don't want in any way to stop you talking. I want to encourage you to talk. So is there anything that those who've not said anything so far would like to contribute to the conversation? Hello. Yeah, I've forgotten your name. I'm ever so sorry.
No.
With David.
Yeah, unmuted.
Christine.
Christine, I'm so sorry to have. I'm terrible on remembering names. I do apologise. Christine, yes, you wanted to say something.
Well, just briefly on the networking scene, I must admit it worked fine for me in the respect that it's not a conversation the same way. You go around the room talking about your business, and therefore it's no different on Zoom. But I do take the point that you don't really get to know people the same way. I knew a lot of people there, and that was fine. But the new people I didn't get to know so well. But that's just my thoughts. But I'm also very interested to know how many people will change in future when we do finally come out of this thing. How many people will actually change their way of doing their business, or just go back to how they were before? Does anybody have any thoughts on it? I mean, particularly John, in your trade, I've always thought that doctors ought to have telephone appointments for people, but they seem to resist it before COVID. Now, I think obviously there's a lot of face-to-face appointments that are very important, but there's also telephone appointments that could take up so much less time of a doctor's time.
Yeah, I agree. And this is something that's been talked about. Personally, I've never really liked telephone appointments, and I've never liked the idea of video appointments. Not because I don't like the technology, obviously, but because there's you don't, as other people have said on the calls, you don't get the same rapport. You can't see the whole of the body. One of my medical friends was talking about having actually medical meetings and organizational medical meetings, local medical committee type stuff, not diagnostic things. But one of the things he was saying that he didn't really like online meetings because he liked to smell them. And I think that's quite a nice way of doing it. One of the things for me is that you don't get the same subtlety on the screen as you do when you look at somebody directly. Things like, even things like skin rashes. You look at a picture of a skin rash and you can't quite get the colors right, because getting the color right is not about the absolute color. It's about what the thing is next to and what the color of light is that is falling on that particular thing. And you've probably all seen the lovely visual, what's the word I want, where you get peculiar things happening, where you think you know what the color of something is, and then it's pulled across and you can see that a completely different color it matches the color that you once thought was green, but it's now purple or whatever. I think there was a thing with a dress a few months ago, or maybe a year or two ago, where that sort of thing happened. And there are in terms of perception of color, we used to think it was just a matter of how much red and how much green and how much blue light and all that lot was coming in. But now I think people are realizing that it's an awful lot more subtle than that. And for me, there's an awful lot of pattern matching within medicine. You look at somebody coming in through the door, and you get an enormous amount of information within the first half a second of them coming in. And it's all done by pattern matching. And every doctor, every single doctor will say that will give an account of where they are sitting in their surgery, and somebody that they know quite well comes in through the door and all the hairs on the back of their neck stand up straight, because they know there is something terribly wrong that's going on. Even if consciously they can't work out what it is, they just look at the patient, and it may not be something that's mental and behavioral. It could be something about what is happening physically to them. Maybe their color has subtly changed. Maybe they're in the early stages of jaundice, or they're walking very awkwardly because of something else that's going on, or they've got a terrible headache, that sort of stuff. But every single doctor that I've ever met has said there are occasions when they've just had this hair on the back of the neck moment. So, so I find it difficult to do things like consultations over over a video link or something like that. You can do a lot of it. You can do a lot by telephone. And I think to some extent it may be just that I'm so accustomed to doing it one way that the thought of trying to do it a different way means that I have really to unlearn the odd 20 or 30 years that I've been doing medicine. And that's a bit difficult because you're not quite sure whether the thing that you're going to replace it with is actually going to be better or worse than the thing that you already have. And an awful lot of medicine is very subtle, and an awful lot of medicine is very difficult to quantify and very difficult to put your finger on. And it's very much an unknown. If you've learned how to do something one way and you're moving to something else, you've got that person's life in your hands, and if it goes wrong...
Can I interrupt for a moment, which is...
By all means.
One of the things that really bothers me, and I had a discussion with my niece, who practices in St George's down the road.
Right. Practices as a doctor?
No, she's an OT.
Right.
Well, she's done all sorts of things, actually. Anyway, we won't go into her. However, one of the things we were discussing is the apprenticeships and from in terms of medical, there's lots of stuff you learn by sitting by Nelly physically, sitting by somebody and watching them do it. See, I'm helping somebody debug a project they're trying to do, a little home tech project, but not being able to see what they've got on their screen, even on Zoom or screen sharing, that kind of thing. I want to see. I want to see the wire that's fallen off that nobody's noticed.
Yeah.
And you can't do that unless you're in the room. But I'm really concerned about the sitting, all those skills that we all learn by sitting by Nelly or having some mentor, take us through, show us the ropes, quite literally. The first thing I was taught is how to steal somebody's power supply when I started my first day at Raykel Avionics. All that sort of stuff, potentially, if things don't get back to normal, quotes, soon, lots and lots of people will be losing out on lots and lots of silly little skills. However, I'll add, they'll probably be picking up all kinds of clever ones that none of us have ever thought about, which I hope will happen. But it's just I'll just stick it out there as a concern.
Yeah, yes, I think that's an interesting point. Again, I was saying, because I've just seen Samantha's come back on. Is there anything that there are about 4 or 5 people who are listening in? I hope you're enjoying it. If there are things that you'd like to say, then we would love to hear from you. I'm not going to push anybody into trying to feel they ought to say anything, but we would love to hear if you would like to say something or ask a question. And if you want to, and you're on on the visual side of the computer, then you can put your hand up using the software if you want to do that, so that I can introduce you. We've got about another 10 minutes left of the formal bit of this. Are there any subjects that we haven't touched on that people would like to bring up, or problems that they see for the future, or whatever?
Hi, can I say
yes,
something?
By all means.
Yeah, it's very interesting what has been said so far, but nobody has mentioned anything about how they tend to keep fit.
Right.
So basically, prior to COVID-19, I'd never worked from home. Although as a software engineer, one would think that it's something that's quite, it's something that you would expect someone like a software engineer to be able to comfortably work from home. So I'd never worked from home. And so the first couple of weeks was quite difficult. But as I got into it, I sort of found myself in a position where it was becoming more comfortable. And as time went on, I realized that maybe in the future, I'll find it difficult to go back to the office and work from the office. So my company, they've put together a policy whereby all staff would have to decide whether they would want to go back full time to work from home, from the office Monday to Friday. And so they set up a pool, and the decision from I mean, we are a multinational company, and the decision worldwide was that most would like to work from home 3 days, 2 to 3 days a week. And as a result of that, plans are being put together to make sure that that would go through.
That's a very interesting thing, because I mean, I'm a person, I like the idea of working from home because I like being at home. I'm very fortunate because I've got a lovely garden around me. So I just, when I'm getting a bit bored, I stare out of the window and go, oh, isn't it lovely? And I'm highly aware how fortunate I am. But I can equally understand why people want to be among other people and having the personal connections. I've heard a lot of people talking about wanting to continue working from home. And what is interesting to me, again, that I hadn't realized, again, all these people who are accustomed to working from screens and things like this actually are missing the human side of it, and they do want to meet, and they, etc.
So
fascinating.
Yeah. Something that's quite important to me is the keeping fit part of it.
Yeah.
Which is very important for mental well-being.
I fully agree.
Yeah, and so what I do is every 30 minutes, I bought some fitness equipment, and so every 30 minutes, what I tend to do is to spend about 5 to 10 minutes to do some sort of not heavyweight lifting, but something that would get the blood in my system flowing.
Yeah.
And I tend to find that it really works. It really works, because sometimes I feel as though some cold is coming. And when I stand up and I do some sort of physical activity, it sort of rejuvenates me and gives me that energy, to keep going. And I make sure that every 30 minutes I stand up and do that for 10 minutes, around 10 minutes.
I think that's very sensible. I think I would want to say exactly the same as I said to Lawrence earlier when we were talking about booking things back to back and not giving time for space to relax and things like this. I think there's another aspect of it which you very definitely brought to everybody's attention, which is the importance of giving yourself time to go and do something physical, and giving yourself time to have a stretch and a walk round, and something that raises the heartbeat for a little bit, and even if it's only sort of going outside the door and running around the block and then coming back in and sitting down again. But I think that the other thing that I would tie that in with what I was saying to Lawrence was, this needs booking in on your times on your diary for the whole day, so that you don't end up just sort of putting your head down and working, because it's very interesting working, isn't it? Working, and then somewhere around 12:30 you go, I think I've done too much today. So I think timetabling it is not a bad idea at all.
That's exactly part of my daily schedule. So it's in my daily plan.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that.
Where can I buy some of this discipline stuff that everyone's talking about? Because I think I've been missing all my life.
The Pomodoro technique link that I've put, I don't know if that link's any good, but it was something that I heard about the first time at one of the meetups for Raspberry Pis I used to attend in London regularly, where somebody was talking about this little timer. Basically, it's a half-hour timer that isn't really half an hour. It's basically 25 minutes, and it goes off and reminds you that you've just missed another half an hour of not getting up and looking out the window. I'll add that one of the things that I often found driving home from work, I would solve the problem that I've been thinking of all afternoon. I kind of go, oh no, how's that going to, why isn't that working? Blah, blah, blah. Second roundabout on the way home, halfway down the A24, I'd go, oh, bloody hell. Why haven't I thought to put a debug here and do that? I'll do that in the morning. And suddenly a whole afternoon staring at a problem has disappeared, because my brain has bubbled the idea up when I wasn't thinking about it. So stepping away and not thinking about a problem, I think, is a really useful thing.
Very useful. Well, that brings to mind something that I've discovered in a big way, which I've now completely forgot what I was going to say. Oh dear. It must be tiredness. Yeah, I know what it was. I, as a GP, I've always had to live on the job, because originally when we started, we had to be available to be on call at all stages and to hurtle out in the middle of the night. And so I actually ended up living in my first, when I was first in Amstel in practice, I was literally 100 yards away from my surgery. At all times. So there was no downtime going home. There was no sort of coming out of the door and then walking up the road and thinking about things for an hour and so, well, I get on the train or the bus or walk a long way down the canal to get home. It was, you're working and then suddenly you're back home straight away. And that was actually quite a shock. And I think that there's a great advantage in having a job where you do actually have a commute, because it gives you time to work down or work up. You know, if you're going to work, you sort of gear yourself up to work by the time you go through the gates, or alternatively where things are getting you know, where you've really got yourself quite tired, but you haven't, your mind's buzzing, and you don't have the time to let yourself go down again. And again, this goes back again to the things I was talking about with Lawrence and George, I think it was, and Andrew. You need to schedule these things in the day, so that you realize that it's not a good idea suddenly to stop work in your office and then go hammering off and imagine that you can go straight into the bosom of your family without having the opportunity to go, well, that's my thought anyway. But I remember vividly many times coming back home when I got you know, 3 rather small children, and I'd come through the door and there would be daddy, and my wife voice would be heard floating over the back saying, don't get to him, don't disturb him, give him a chance, and that's something that's very difficult if you are actually really working from home, or else working from the shed in the bottom of the garden, and you just walked up to the garden and you're in the house. You don't get a chance to just to let go and let your hair down. I think that's important. Anything else anybody wants to say?
If I may please just raise 2 things. When
Yeah.
you were asking about why some people have expressed their interest in working from home rather than the opposite.
Yeah.
I believe there is it's a human nature about monotony. People do not like monotony. And one more thing is that people who were not acquainted with working from home would like to work from home more often, because they think that it is going to make their life easier commuting, which this is really a good point. But in other words, when we think about monotony, people want to just try something new. And those who are actually saying that they love to work from home, I do work from home. I like it, I appreciate it, but it has its own practicalities, it has its own pros, but it has also some cons. And this is where we need to make actually to achieve a balancing act in doing these things. But of course, changing the atmosphere, moving a little bit, walking a little bit is absolutely essential. And establishing a healthy routine in the day is very essential.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. You said there was a second thing you wanted to say, or have you encompassed all the things?
Yeah, actually, I mixed them both.
Right, okay, that's lovely. We've come to just after 8:15, which is, I think, when we decided that we would have the official part of this. Is there anything else that anybody wants to say or comment or again, I'm aware that one or two people haven't actually said anything, and it would be lovely to hear from you, but I fully understand if you'd prefer just to sit and listen. But do feel free to jump in and
Hey, John, thank you for expertly steering the conversation. I just want to throw in an oddball that you were kind of talking about, that these computer people like us who seems to be here because we're missing the human contact, which is a nice observation. But I wonder if it may be the reverse, that actually the people who are very comfortable work on computers by themselves and not looking for contact do not find it interesting to join us tonight. So that's why, while we have a group that represent that voice, it may or may not be really representative of the wider computing community.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought of that. A very, very good point. So, yeah, because one of the things that actually that brings on a whole thing that I was thinking about talking about, and you know, by the way, feel free to just to disappear off this call if you've got other things that you want to do. One of my particular areas, scientifically speaking, is in statistics, and not so much the calculations, but the logic behind why people do things and how you can do surveys and miss things because you've excluded people from your survey. And the interesting thing, Fan, is that you just said exactly the thing that I should have picked up on, which is whether people are not on the call because they're not interested in being on this sort of call. But I've been very interested in the way particularly the statistics have come up and the predictionary statistics in terms of particularly obviously what COVID is going to do and when it's going to do it and how can we stop it and things like that. And I think it's probably made people really quite aware of how important predictive statistics can be. Anybody want to say anything about that? Oh, the other thing that I was going to add into that was fake news, because there's been so much fake news going around. You know, trying to spot fake news, spot bad science, spot bad statistics, and deal with it is a whole area that we haven't actually really touched on. I don't know whether it's something that people here are interested in. If it is now, speak now or forever hold your peace.
It is a subject for a future talk, by the way. So, yeah, I don't know. The evidence of fakery is an interesting one in the first place, but I'll bow out of this for a moment. Let somebody else speak.
Anybody else?
Well, statistically speaking, I mean, I'm a reviewer in certain journals, and when I receive a manuscript to review, I basically double check the methodology, double check the literature, and of course double check the validity of the statistics used. One of the main factors is whether the sample space is representative, and whether the sample is also, I would say, can produce a certain level of confidence. And for this, we use several metrics to achieve whether the sample is explainable, is correct somehow, or it is, I would say, otherwise accurate, and we can make the proper inferences by following statistical methodologies. But in our case, I believe today, if I may say, probably the invitation was not given a buffer of time. I'm not sure. Probably this could be the case.
Looking back, I wish we'd made the thing for maybe a week's time, but I think there was a reason why we couldn't do that on this particular occasion. But I fully agree. I think for something like that, we ended up announcing it 3 days beforehand, which is not good enough. Yeah. So I'm sorry about that, but it was one of these things that couldn't really be helped, I think, if we were going to have a meeting in January. And I think we've had a very good meeting. I think it's been a real revelation, some of the things that we've been talking about, totally unexpected. But anyway, shall we leave it there? Thank you very much. Thank you, by the way, to Saverio, who has been loyally taking down notes in the background. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who has taken part. Hello, Saverio. You've switched your camera on again.
Hello, John.
Hi. Thank you for taking notes and things for us.
You're welcome.
Are you able to tell us what you're planning to do over the actual record? Are you going to show it to people or what?
He's gone.
Right. You're on mute.
Sorry, John, was that to me?
Yes.
Oh, well, no, I'll share it with you first and then you decide, and we might put it on the website, just like we do with the slides.
Lovely. Yeah. Andrew, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, can I ask sort of show of hands or via chat or something, some way, those that haven't spoken, how many of you would attend, well, how many are planning to attend the next one because you found this interesting? How many would have got subjects like us to approach? Sorry, I've stolen your thunder. Sorry, John. I'm just wondering, sort of for those that haven't spoken up, how many? What have you thought? Feedback. I think we'd love to hear, especially if you've got something that we haven't mentioned or that you realise after this is all finished. I think we'd like some feedback to find out.
How would people be able to do that? What would you recommend?
How do they find out about the event, possibly through Eventbrite or through direct email from BCS, in which case sort of a back chat that way, wherever they found out from, I imagine. But bear in mind, I'm in Tooting and not a real member.
No, don't worry. Saverio, what's the easiest way for people to contact us if they don't want to be on the to say anything at this moment?
Sorry, John. How do people contact us if they're?
Yes, well, if they've got a comment about what we've been talking about, or have suddenly thought about something that they wish they'd said but didn't have the opportunity, what would be the best way for them to communicate?
Well, there's a couple of ways. Is one, they could respond to the invitation, the email invitation that they got.
Right. Fine.
To me or to Fan or to your,
That's lovely. That's very happy with that. So long as people know what the best way to do the feedback is, that's fine. So thank you very much indeed for that, Saverio. Okay, I think we'll end it there. Thank you very, very much for everybody for your contribution. It's been a really super discussion. David, you wanted to say something, did you?
No, that's a clap.
Oh, that's a clapping. All right. Thank you very much indeed. Totally good. Thank you for everything, everybody. See you next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.